My son said I'd be in a nursing home soon. He said I was in the way. He was right about one thing. I was going to a nursing home. But I wouldn't be a resident. I would be the owner. And he was about to learn that the woman he dismissed as a burden was about to become his landlord. If you believe that the deepest betrayals come from those closest to us, and that justice, when it's finally served, is best served cold, then do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You are not going to want to miss a single second of how I turned my son's ultimate insult into my greatest victory. Part 1. The Unraveling. The silence in my house used to be a comfort. It was a peaceful quiet, the kind you earn after 42 years of life, after raising a child on your own, after finally getting a moment to yourself. But that night, the silence was different. It was a hollow, ringing void, punctuated only by the frantic thumping of my own heart against my ribs. I was staring at my laptop screen, the soft glow of the online banking portal painting my face in a sickly blue light. The number on the screen didn't make sense. $3,417.22. I blinked, rubbing my eyes. It had to be a glitch. A website error. Just yesterday or maybe the day before, the days blurred together sometimes, that number had been much healthier. It had been my nest egg. My leaky roof and busted furnace fund. My maybe one day I'll finally take that trip to Italy fund. It was the result of 1,000 small sacrifices, of packing my lunch instead of buying it, of driving the same reliable sedan for 12 years, of mending clothes instead of replacing them. It was a testament to a life lived with caution and care. It was supposed to be over $23,000. My breath hitched. I scrolled down, my hand shaking so badly that the mouse arrow skittered across the screen. And then I saw it. A series of transfers. Not to the electric company or the mortgage lender. Transfers to an account I didn't recognize, but whose name made my blood run cold. M. Collins Innovations. Michael. There were a dozen of them, stretching back over the last 4 months. Small ones at first. 500 here. 800 there. Small enough to go unnoticed if you weren't looking closely. But they grew bolder. 2,000. Then 3. The last one, just 5 days ago, was for $5,000 flat. The total came to a neat, horrifying sum, $20,000. Gone. The sound that escaped my lips was a raw, wounded thing, something between a gasp and a sob. Michael Collins. My son. The boy whose scraped knees I had bandaged, whose fevers I had nursed, whose report cards, good and bad, were still tucked away in a box in the attic. The boy for whom I had given up everything. His father, a man with charming promises and a wandering eye, had left when Michael was 2. He walked out for a younger woman and a life free of responsibility, leaving me with a toddler on my hip, a mountain of bills, and a heart shattered into a million pieces. I could have crumbled. Part of me wanted to. But I looked down at Michael's little face, at his wide, trusting eyes, and I knew crumbling wasn't an option. So I worked. I worked jobs that were beneath my skill level because the hours were flexible. I turned down a management training program, a real career track, because it would have meant less time at home. I clipped coupons, bought secondhand, and learned to fix a leaky faucet from a library book. Every spare dollar, every ounce of my energy, was poured into him. Piano lessons, soccer camps, a decent car when he turned 16, tuition for the state university he barely scraped through. I never took vacations. I never bought myself nice things. My life wasn't my own, it was the foundation for his. I thought that was what a good mother did. I thought I was building his future. I never imagined he was just seeing it as a bank to be robbed. I called him. My fingers felt like clumsy sausages as I stabbed at the screen of my phone. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice loud, background noise clattering behind him. Hey Mom. Can't talk, I'm out with some potential investors. Big stuff is happening. Investors. The name on the bank transfer flashed in my mind. M. Collins Innovations. It sounded so official, so meaningless. Michael, I need you to come over, I said, my voice tight and strained. Can it wait? I'm in the middle of a killer deal. This new crypto art venture is about to pop off. No, I said, the word like a shard of glass in my throat. It can't wait. Now. The line went quiet for a moment. He sighed, a gust of pure annoyance. Fine. Whatever. 20 minutes. The 20 minutes he took to arrive were the longest of my life. I paced the worn floral rug in my living room, the one he'd taken his first steps on. I saw ghosts of him everywhere, the pencil mark on the doorframe from when he was 10, the faint scratch on the hardwood floor from a toy truck driven too fast. These were the sacred artifacts of my motherhood, and now they felt like evidence in a crime scene. When he finally strolled in, he didn't even bother to take off his shoes. He was wearing a ridiculously expensive-looking jacket, the kind that tries too hard to look casual, and a watch on his wrist that gleamed under the lamplight. A watch I knew for a fact he couldn't afford. A watch I had apparently paid for. "Okay, I'm here," he said, tossing his keys onto the coffee table. "What's the emergency?" He flopped onto the sofa, my sofa, and put his feet up on the ottoman. The arrogance was a physical presence in the room. I stood before him, the laptop clutched in my hands like a shield. I couldn't bring myself to speak. I just turned it around and showed him the screen. He squinted at it, a flicker of something. Annoyance? Recognition? Crossing his face. He didn't look guilty. He looked bored. "Yeah? What about it?" "Michael," I whispered, the name cracking. "The money. $20,000. It's gone." He leaned back, a slow, lazy smirk spreading across his face. It was a look I'd never seen from him before. It was cruel. "I wouldn't say it's gone, Mom. I'd say it's been invested." "Invested? In what?" "In M. Collins Innovations." "Michael, that's just you. You've been taking money from my savings account." "I've been utilizing stagnant capital for a high-yield growth opportunity," he said, as if reciting a line from a bad movie. "You had that money just sitting there, collecting dust. I put it to work." My head was spinning. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. That was my money. My retirement. The money I saved in case I got sick. You don't just utilize someone else's life savings. He laughed. It wasn't a real laugh, it was a short, sharp bark of condescending air. "Oh, relax. It's for us. When this pays off, we're going to be set. I'm doing this for our future." "Our future? Michael, you didn't ask. You stole from me." And that's when his eyes went cold. The lazy smirk vanished, replaced by a flat, dismissive glare. He swung his feet off the ottoman and sat up, leaning forward as if speaking to a child. "You know, for someone who's supposed to be my mother, you have zero faith in me. All I hear is no, Michael, be careful, Michael." "I'm a man, Mom. I'm making moves. This is how the world works. The old makes way for the new." The words hung in the air, thick and poisonous. "The old." I repeated, my voice barely audible. He stood up then, towering over me. "Yes. The old. Mom, you should be thanking me. You don't need money at your age. What are you going to do with it? Buy more knitting yarn? Let's be realistic. You'll be in a nursing home soon anyway." The room tilted. Every ounce of air was sucked from my lungs. He wasn't just a thief. He was a stranger. A cruel, heartless stranger living in my son's body. He picked up a promotional magnet from the fridge, one from a local realtor, and flicked it with his thumbnail. "Maybe I'll pick you a nice one," he continued, his voice laced with a sick, casual cruelty. "One with a garden, so you can plant your little flowers. It's for the best. You're just, getting to be a bit of a burden." A burden. After every sleepless night. After every sacrifice. After every moment I put his needs before my own, from the day he was born until this very second. I was a burden. An obstacle. A bank account to be drained and an old piece of furniture to be put into storage. I stared at him, at the handsome face I had once adored, and saw nothing of the boy I loved. I saw a man hollowed out by greed and entitlement. "Is that how you see me, Michael?" I whispered, the words feeling like dust on my tongue. "After everything?" He shrugged, jamming his hands into the pockets of his designer jacket. Exactly, he said coldly, his voice devoid of any emotion. You're just in the way. I didn't argue. I didn't scream or cry. A strange and terrifying calm washed over me. It was the calm of absolute certainty. The calm you feel when a building collapses and you are left standing in the rubble, realizing nothing will ever be the same. The love I had for him, a vast and unconditional ocean, had just evaporated in the heat of his contempt. And in its place, something new and hard and cold was beginning to form. He thought I was old. He thought I was finished. He thought he could write me off, pack me away, and spend the last of my money without a second thought. He had drawn a line in the sand. And I knew, standing there in the ruins of my own kitchen, that I could either let myself be erased, or I could build a fortress on that line. Part 2. The Weight of the Silence. After Michael left, the house was no longer quiet, it was dead. The silence he left behind was a suffocating blanket, heavy with the echoes of his words. A burden. In the way. Nursing home. Each phrase was a ghost that haunted the corners of my small, tidy home. For the first 48 hours, I barely moved. I sat in my armchair, the one with the slightly frayed arms where I used to read him bedtime stories, and I just existed. Sleep didn't come. When I closed my eyes, I saw his smirk. When the house creaked, I heard his condescending laugh. I tried to rationalize. He was young, impulsive. Maybe this was just a phase, a terrible, misguided attempt at being a businessman. I picked up my phone a dozen times, my thumb hovering over his name. I wanted to call, to scream, to plead. I wanted to find the little boy I knew was still buried in there somewhere and beg him to come back. But my hand would always fall back into my lap. The coldness in his eyes hadn't been impulsive. It was calculated. It was the chillingly calm expression of someone who had already written you off. A week later, my sister, Carol, called. She lived 3 states away, but she had a sixth sense for when things were wrong. Amanda? You sound off, she said, her voice crackling over the line. Everything okay? I hesitated. Admitting what Michael had done felt like admitting my own failure as a mother. Where had I gone wrong? Had I spoiled him too much? Had I made his life so easy that he never learned the value of anything? But the weight of the secret was too much to bear alone. So, in a halting, choked voice, I told her everything. The missing money. The confrontation. The words. There was a long silence on her end. When she finally spoke, her voice was full of a sad, tired resignation. Oh, Mandy. I'm so sorry. I wish I could say I was surprised. What do you mean? He's been like this for a while, you know, she said gently. The last time he visited us for Christmas, all he did was talk about his big plans and how nobody understood his vision. He made a joke to his cousin about how he was going to be a millionaire before he was 30, and when he was, he'd get you sorted out. I thought it was just arrogant talk. I never dreamed he'd. Her voice trailed off. He'd steal from you. The conversation confirmed my deepest fear. This wasn't a sudden change. This was who my son had become. He saw me not as a person, but as a stepping stone, and now that the stone was worn, he was ready to cast it aside. My despair began to curdle into a slow-burning anger. It was a foreign feeling. I wasn't an angry person, I was a problem solver, a nurturer. But this anger was different. It was a cold, hard knot in the pit of my stomach. It was the anger of a cornered animal. 2 weeks after our fight, Michael showed up again. Unannounced. He walked in carrying a plastic bag from a fancy bakery. He placed a box of overpriced pastries on the kitchen counter and smiled at me, a brilliant, false smile that didn't reach his eyes. Peace offering, he said breezily. Let's just forget about that whole misunderstanding, okay? I was stressed. Big deals on the line. You know how it is. He was acting as if we'd had a minor tiff about taking out the trash. He clearly expected me to fall back into the role of doting, forgiving mother. The Amanda of 3 weeks ago might have. She would have been so relieved to have him back that she would have brushed the theft, the cruelty, under the rug. But that Amanda was gone. I looked at him, my face a mask of calm. Where is the money, Michael? His smile faltered. Mom, I told you it's invested. You'll get it back, triplefold. Just be patient. I want it back now, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. All of it. The irritation flashed across his face again. Look, it's not liquid right now, okay? That's not how these things work. You can't just pull out. He let out an exasperated sigh and reached into his pocket, pulling out a small stack of glossy brochures. He tossed them onto the counter next to the pastries. Actually, this is what I came to talk about. I've been doing some research for you. To help you plan for the future. My blood turned to ice. They were pamphlets for retirement communities and assisted living facilities. On top of the pile was a brochure for a place called Maplewood Care Center. It had a picture of a handsome brick building on the front, surrounded by manicured lawns and smiling, silver-haired seniors playing shuffleboard. I checked this one out, he said, tapping the Maplewood brochure. It's the best in the area. Private rooms, decent food, they even have a little movie night. You'd like it. It would be good for you. Less for you to worry about. I stared at the brochure, at the manufactured smiles and the pristine lawn. He wasn't just suggesting it anymore. He was planning it. He was greasing the wheels, trying to make the path to my disposal as smooth as possible. He thought a box of croissants and a glossy pamphlet would be enough to make me pack my bags and quietly disappear from his life. The insult was so profound, so layered with disrespect, that it almost transcended anger and became a kind of dark, horrifying clarity. You're really serious about this, I said, my voice flat. Of course I am. Mom, this is me taking care of you, he said, the hypocrisy thick enough to choke on. You don't have your nest egg anymore to rely on, so we have to be practical. I can help with the deposit, once my ventures pay out. Think of it as me paying you back. He would put me in a home, using my own stolen money to do it, and frame it as an act of generosity. The sheer, diabolical narcissism of it was astounding. I picked up the brochure for Maplewood Care Center. The paper felt slick and cold in my hands. I looked at the address, a street not 10 miles from my own house. I could almost picture him driving me there, helping me with my single suitcase, and then driving away with a sigh of relief, my existence neatly filed away. He saw my silence as acquiescence. See? It's a good plan, he said, his smug tone returning. I'll leave these with you. Take a look. Let me know what you think. I can arrange a tour for next week. He patted my shoulder, a gesture so condescending it made my skin crawl. Then, he grabbed a pastry from the box, winked, and walked out of my life for the second time in a month. I stood there in the kitchen, the brochure clutched in my hand. The smell of sugar and butter from the pastries filled the air, a sickeningly sweet scent of betrayal. I didn't cry. The time for tears was over. The shock had worn off, the grief had subsided, and all that was left was that cold, hard knot of anger. It was no longer just a knot, it was a growing core of steel in my spine. He thought he could discard me. He thought I was weak, finished, irrelevant. He had taken my past, my savings, and was trying to dictate my future. A room in a facility he'd picked out for me. He had left me with nothing, or so he thought. But he'd overlooked one thing. He'd left me with a target. He left the glossy brochures on my coffee table like a death sentence. And as I stared at the smiling, silver-haired residents of Maplewood Care Center, a different kind of fire started to burn through the numbness. It wasn't despair. It was ignition. Part 3, The Architect of the Trap. The days that followed Michael's visit were a blur of quiet, meticulous activity. The grief that had paralyzed me was gone, replaced by a laser-sharp focus I hadn't felt in years. It was the same focus I'd had back in my 20s, before marriage and motherhood, when I was an assistant comptroller for a mid-sized manufacturing firm. I had been good with numbers, good at seeing the patterns others missed. I'd given it up for Michael, but the machinery of that mind, it turned out, was just dormant, not broken. I spent hours in my little home office, the Maplewood brochure lying on my desk like a battle plan. I didn't look at the pictures of the happy residents or the list of amenities. I looked at the fine print. I found the company that managed it, a regional healthcare conglomerate. From there, I started digging. I spent my nights falling down rabbit holes of public records, financial statements, and local business news archives. I drank bitter black coffee until 3 in the morning, the glow of the monitor my only companion, and slowly, a picture began to emerge. Maplewood Care Center was in trouble. Deep trouble. The parent company had over-leveraged itself on a series of risky acquisitions, and Maplewood, one of its older, less profitable facilities, was an anchor dragging it down. Occupancy rates were down, maintenance costs were up, and a recent health inspection had flagged them for deferred environmental updates. It was a classic case of corporate neglect. They were bleeding money, and they were desperate. The knowledge sent a jolt of electricity through me. It was a long shot, a crazy, impossible idea, but it took root in my mind and refused to let go. The first person I called was David Chun. David was an old friend, a man I'd known since high school. He had been a groomsman at my wedding and had offered me a shoulder to cry on when my husband left. He was now one of the most successful commercial real estate brokers in the state. He was sharp, discreet, and owed me a favor or two from the old days. We met for coffee at a small, out-of-the-way cafe. I laid it all out for him, not the emotional story about Michael, but the business case. I showed him the financials I'd managed to pull, the inspection reports, the occupancy data. I presented it not as a wounded mother, but as a potential investor. He listened patiently, his brow furrowed. When I was finished, he took a long sip of his espresso. "Amanda, this is ambitious. The place is a mess. Why on earth would you want to buy a failing nursing home?" I met his gaze, and for the first time, I let a sliver of the truth show. "Let's just say I have a vested interest in its future management," I said, my voice even. "And I think it's undervalued. With the right leadership, it could be turned around." David studied my face for a long moment, seeing the steel that had replaced the sadness. He didn't push for more details. He just nodded slowly. "All right. I'll make some quiet inquiries. No promises. The parent company is a shark tank, but a desperate shark is still a shark. They might be willing to offload it for the right price to avoid a bigger loss." The next few weeks were a masterclass in tension. David worked his magic, making back-channel calls, floating the idea of an anonymous private buyer. The company, just as I'd predicted, was interested. Eager, even. They wanted out, and they wanted it fast. Now came the hard part, the money. My savings were gone. I had the house, but the equity wouldn't be enough. I needed more capital, and I needed it without Michael getting a whiff of what I was doing. I went to the small community bank that held my mortgage, the one where the branch manager, Mr. Henderson, had known me for 15 years. I didn't give him the full story either. I framed it as a business opportunity, a chance to get back into the workforce after years of being a homemaker. I built a comprehensive business plan, staying up all night to create cash flow projections, turnaround strategies, and staffing models. I outlined how I would cut corporate waste, improve services to attract new residents, and make the facility profitable within 3 years. Mr. Henderson was skeptical. "Mrs. Collins, this is a significant risk. Your financial history is stable, but you have no recent experience in this sector." "I have experience in running a tight budget, Mr. Henderson," I replied, my voice firm. "I have experience in management from my early career. And I have more motivation to make this succeed than you can possibly imagine." He saw something in my eyes, a fierce, unblinking determination. He agreed to take the proposal to the loan committee. The wait for their decision was agonizing. Every time the phone rang, my heart leaped into my throat. I was living on a knife's edge, a breath away from either the greatest victory of my life or utter financial ruin. During this time, Michael would call occasionally. His voice was always laced with impatience. "So, have you thought about Maplewood? Did you schedule that tour yet?" He'd ask, as if inquiring about a lunch date. "I'm still considering my options," I'd say, my voice a carefully constructed blend of weary resignation. I had to play the part of the defeated old woman he thought I was. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but it was crucial to the plan. Then came the close call. David called me, his voice urgent. "We have a problem. Another buyer has emerged. A bigger property group. They're sniffing around, and they can offer cash, close in a week. We're going to lose it if we don't move now." That same afternoon, Mr. Henderson called. The loan committee had rejected my application. It was too risky, they said. Too unconventional. For a single, terrifying moment, I felt the floor drop out from under me. It was over. All of it. The sleepless nights, the planning, the flicker of hope, all for nothing. Michael had won. I hung up the phone and sat in silence, the weight of defeat pressing down on me. But then I looked at the Maplewood brochure still on my desk. I saw Michael's smug face, heard his cold dismissal. A burden. The anger, hot and pure, surged through me again, burning away the despair. No. I was not done yet. I called Mr. Henderson back. I want to speak to the committee, I demanded. In person. It was highly irregular, but he agreed. The next day, I stood before a panel of 4 stern-faced bankers. I didn't just present my business plan this time. I told them a story. Not the whole truth about Michael, but a version of it. I told them about a woman who had spent her life providing for others, who had been underestimated and cast aside, and who was determined to build something of her own. I spoke not just about financial projections, but about dignity. About creating a place for the elderly that wasn't a holding pen, but a home. A community. I poured every ounce of my conviction, my pain, and my fury into that presentation. When I finished, the room was silent. The chairman of the committee looked over my file, then looked at me. Your son, Michael Collins, he said, reading from my paperwork. He's the one behind Collins Innovations, isn't he? We've seen his name on a few. Let's call them optimistic loan applications. None of them successful. The dots connected in his mind. He didn't know the whole story, but he knew enough. He saw the pattern. A reckless son and a determined mother. He looked at his colleagues, then back at me. We'll reevaluate. 2 days later, the loan was approved. The closing was a whirlwind of paperwork and legal jargon. David was by my side, guiding me through the process. When the final document was pushed in front of me, my hand trembled as I picked up the pen. This was it. The moment of no return. I was leveraging my entire life, my home, everything I had, on this one audacious act of defiance. I signed my name. Amanda Collins. The letters were clear and firm. The pen felt heavy in my hand, the ink sealing not just a business deal, but a declaration of war. The building was mine. The trap was set. Now, all I had to do was wait for my son to walk right into it. Part 4, the checkmate. The 3 weeks between signing the papers and the final confrontation were the calm before the storm. Legally, Maplewood Care Center was mine, but I had arranged with David and the lawyers to keep the transfer of ownership quiet. The on-site staff only knew that new management was coming. They didn't know it was a 42-year-old woman who lived 10 miles away. I spent the time preparing. I met with the facility director, a tired but decent woman named Brenda, under the guise of being a consultant for the new ownership. I reviewed every line item in the budget, every staff schedule, every resident complaint. I was learning my new kingdom from the inside out. And I was preparing my house. I packed a single suitcase, filled with practical clothes. I left it by the front door. The rest of my home, I left untouched. I wanted the scene to be perfect. The call came on a Tuesday morning. It was Michael. All right, Mom, I'm getting tired of waiting, he said, his voice sharp with impatience. I cleared my schedule for Thursday afternoon. I'm coming to pick you up at 2 o'clock. We're going to tour Maplewood. And don't try to get out of it. This is happening. Okay, Michael, I said, my voice soft and defeated. Thursday at 2. I could almost hear his satisfied smirk through the phone. He had finally worn the old lady down. On Thursday, I was ready. I dressed simply, in a pair of slacks and a comfortable sweater. I made a pot of tea and sat at my kitchen table, the same table where he had shattered my world. I wasn't nervous. I was strangely, icily calm. The fury and the fear had been forged into something else entirely, purpose. At 2 o'clock sharp, his pretentious sports car pulled into my driveway. He sauntered in, not even knocking, a triumphant look on his face. Ready to go? He asked, jingling his keys. Don't worry, I'll do all the talking. You just have to smile and nod. Actually, Michael, I said, taking a slow sip of my tea. There's been a change of plans. His face tightened. What do you mean? Mom, we're not postponing this again. You need to face reality. Oh, I have, I said, my voice perfectly even. I've been facing it for months. Why don't you sit down? There's something I need to show you. He sighed dramatically but slumped into the chair opposite me. This better be quick. I reached for a thick manila folder I had placed on the counter. My heart was a steady, rhythmic drum against my ribs. I slid it across the table towards him. It landed with a soft, definitive thud. What's this? He asked, annoyance coloring his tone. More of your bills. Open it, I said. With a huff, he flipped open the folder. His eyes scanned the first page. It was the deed of sale for a commercial property. His eyes narrowed in confusion. He flipped to the next page, a financing agreement from the bank. The next, a certificate of ownership from the county. On every page in clear, legal type, were two names, Maplewood Care Center and Amanda Collins. He froze. He slowly lifted his head, his eyes wide with disbelief. The arrogant smirk was gone, replaced by a slack-jawed confusion. What is this? He stammered. Is this some kind of joke? Do I look like I'm joking, Michael? I watched as the gears in his mind turned, grinding against a reality they couldn't comprehend. He looked from the papers back to my face, searching for the punchline. He found none. You bought it? He whispered, the words barely audible. You bought the nursing home? I did, I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. I bought it last month. The deal closed 3 weeks ago. I've been spending my time meeting the staff, planning renovations, and arranging for better care for the residents. It's been a very busy time. His face, which had been so smug just moments before, began to drain of all color. He looked like a man who had just seen a ghost. The expensive watch on his wrist seemed to mock him, a glittering monument to his own stupidity. But, how? He asked, his voice cracking. The money. You didn't have. No, I didn't, I interrupted, my voice hardening. Because you stole it from me. You stole my safety net. So I had to get creative. I leveraged the one thing I had left that you hadn't touched, this house. I took out a loan so massive that if this venture fails, I will lose everything. All because you thought I was a burden who needed to be put away. I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto his. You were so eager to put me in a nursing home, Michael. You were so certain that my life was over. Well, you got your wish. I'm going to be at Maplewood every single day. I paused, letting the weight of my next words sink in. So from now on, every month when I pay the mortgage on this building, the mortgage you forced me to take out, I'll be thinking of you. And every time you drive past that big brick building on the corner of Elm and Maple, I want you to remember something. I'm not your burden. I'm not in your way. I smiled then, a cold, sharp smile that held no warmth at all. I'm your landlord. The silence that followed was absolute. He just stared, his mouth opening and closing silently, like a fish gasping for air. The entire foundation of his world, his superiority, his belief in my weakness, had just been demolished. He had tried to lock me in a cage, only to find out I owned the whole zoo. Word spread through our small town with the speed of a wildfire. My sister Carol, of course, was the first I told, and she wasn't as discreet as David. The story became a piece of local legend. The son who tried to dump his mother in a home, only to have her buy the place out from under him. Michael became a pariah. His investor friends, who were really just other entitled young men, suddenly stopped taking his calls. His grand business ventures, built on nothing but my stolen money and his own hot air, collapsed one by one. He couldn't go to the local diner without getting pitying looks. He couldn't go to the bar without hearing whispered jokes. He was humiliated, not by my words, but by my actions. And me? My life had just begun. I moved out of my house, renting it out for extra income, and took a small apartment near Maplewood. I poured all my energy into my new role. I tore out the dreary carpets, painted the walls cheerful colors, and hired a chef who believed food should have flavor. I sat with the residents, listened to their stories, and fought with insurance companies on their behalf. I found a purpose I never knew I was missing. I had built a new life, a new home, on the ashes of my son's betrayal. I saw Michael one last time, about 6 months later. He showed up at my office at Maplewood, looking thin and haggard. He apologized. He said he was a fool, that he was sorry, that he would pay me back someday. The words sounded hollow. He wasn't sorry for what he did, he was sorry he got caught. He was sorry he'd lost. I didn't yell. I didn't lecture him. I simply looked at him, a stranger who wore my son's face, and said, "I know." And with that, I closed the door, leaving him standing alone in the hallway of the building that was supposed to be my prison, but had become my palace. Music begins, soft and triumphant. He thought my age made me weak, that my love made me a fool. He learned the hardest way possible that the woman he dismissed as too old and in the way, was still smarter, stronger, and far more capable than he could ever hope to be. He didn't just lose my money or my respect. He lost the power he thought he had over me. And in the end, that was the most satisfying revenge of all. I didn't just save myself from my son's betrayal. I turned his insult into my empire. The greatest victories in life often come after the deepest wounds. Have you ever had to fight back against someone who completely underestimated you? Let me know your story in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you found yourself cheering for a little bit of cold, hard justice, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of epic revenge. Until next time, remember, never let anyone else write your final chapter.